Hello and hi. By this point, I feel like I've established myself that I'm a theater kid through and through, and Broadway is something that is so important to me, as I've talked about it several times by this point. But if you're not familiar, welcome. I love Broadway, I love theater, I love New York, and I can say that I've been so grateful that I've been able to see so many shows in my lifetime. Even to the point where I have a binder completely filled with, well, turning to this page already, I got to meet John Turcaglia when I was in high school and he autographed my picture, but completely filled with playbills that I have seen and collected. Also, clearly I am still not over this being closed. Just saying, to point it out here while we have it. Same for How to Dance in Ohio. And if you aren't familiar, I did a reel on this. So you can watch that below. All this to say that even though I am so grateful that I've gotten to see so many shows, there are still tons of shows that I haven't been able to see due to limited runs, or mainly the main factor here, I was too young.
And of course, Tony season is among us, and this year looks pretty disappointing, unfortunately. So this makes me yearn for all the wonderful shows of the past that I missed out on even more.
Broadway as a whole is a very interesting concept because even though the idea of Broadway has been around for over hundreds of years, the idea of modern Broadway and modern theater is a lot newer. A lot more of the mega Broadway shows that we've come to be familiar with weren't around until the 1980s.
Let's also take a moment to remember that Broadway style music was in the mainstream pop culture during the first half of the century. So many shows that were first on The Great White Way came out with some of the greatest film adaptations that are still treasured to this day. Shows like Singing in the Rain, Bye Bye Birdie, and much more recently Chicago were all able to flesh out their worlds to create maximal immersive experiences and gave audiences a chance to see a version of something that was first only accessible to a limited crowd. It gave these stories a way to be immortal, and more importantly, it gave these stories a chance to have more time to be seen and discovered by multiple generations. In fact, Christian Borle described it best.
And I'm actually not, I'm one of those people who doesn't think it's such a horrible thing that we look to film for ideas. I think a good story is a good story.
Look, there's a genuine reason why I have so much respect and admiration for this person. From some of the interviews I've seen, I relate to a lot of what he speaks about. He'll be mentioned a couple more times during this video, but we'll carry on for now. As I continue to talk about some of the shows on my list, you'll see that they're also pulled from films originally, and the stage shows sometimes work even better than the films did. It's two different mediums, and it's always amazing to see how they're interpreted with the limitations that they might have. The whole reason I bring this point up is to explain that there's so many shows that I adore and have access to thanks to a film adaptation. And there's also a select few amount of shows that have had pro shots made, and I am forever grateful when a show has a pro shot because there are so many shows that I've slept on and didn't take seriously. The best two examples being SpongeBob and Shrek.
I've got my own little patch of the world. It's not a big, bright, beautiful world, but it's mine.
Both were shows when I first found out were happening, thought very negatively of, and thought that they were just a cheap cash grab. And then I got a chance to find their pro shots years later and saw how amazingly clever and fun they were.
So any of those musicals, even if I didn't see them in person, they're still accessible to watch, and therefore wouldn't be part of this list. So with all that to say, those guidelines are there, but let's get right into it. These are not in order whatsoever, but I can start with the oldest one on the list, and that is Ragtime.
In 1902, Father built a house at the crest of the Broadview Avenue Hill in New Rochelle, New York. And it seemed for some years thereafter that all the family's days would be warm and fair.
I did a video all about Ragtime as well, link in the description below, but if you're not familiar, Ragtime is one of my ultimate favorite musicals of all time.
And there was music playing, catching a nation in its pride. Baker and billionaire, everyone
I will never understand why this show isn't more loved and why it ended up being a financial flop. It's filled with so much important history about our country that's not shown in a propaganda way, but instead it focuses on the injustice and prejudice that so many people have unfortunately had to have faced.
The score, the music is breathtaking. I am completely in love with so many of the songs. It has so many important messages, which unfortunately are still relevant today. Even though it was based 100 years ago, we're still dealing with the source material currently, which is insane of it all. But this musical came out in 1998. I was way too young to even know what it was at the time, and it wasn't until I was in high school that I got to discover it. So at that point it was already off Broadway for 10 years. I discovered it 10 years after it was off Broadway. And I just completely fell in love with it. I mean, I'm a history nerd too, especially with the 20th century. This being basically a whole love letter to the beginning of the 20th century and showing a mixture of true historical characters, how they're living, as well as dealing with so many important topics such as racism, immigration, and injustice and prejudice and everything else is serious. They do a fantastic job. Plus it takes place in New York and New Jersey and Atlantic City, which is a place that I visited many, many times before.
Seriously, you do not understand how grateful I am for slime tutorials on YouTube.
I love the musical so much, and I'm so sad that there hasn't been a revival yet. I know I recently talked about this too already, that it was considered a flop. It wasn't really financially sustainable. But listen, nothing on Broadway is financially sustainable right now. So we can't use that excuse. We need to put the art first and not worry about the money. But I know we're in a capitalist society here, so like, it's not gonna happen. I'm dying for a revival. I am dying for a revival. I'm dying for a movie, a film of it. Please, this is so slept on. I feel like it's such an underrated musical and I wish I could see it so badly. I would have loved to have seen the original production, of course, but I was 6 at the time, and so I wouldn't have been able to understand it even if I got to see it. So this is something that I really feel like I wish they would bring back. I wish I could see the original, but since I can't, please bring a revival back, please. And I mean, even though I haven't acted in a long time.
One of my dream roles has always been Evelyn Nesbit. Like, I've always been drawn to her character so much.
Ladies, there's a lesson in my tawdry tale. Beware the path you choose.
I would love to be able to return to acting and play her someday.
And in those days, so very long ago.
A little bit more recent of a show on my list is a revival of the Threepenny Opera starring Alan Cumming, Anna Gassier, and Cyndi Lauper. This ended up being a limited run that ran from March 24th, 2006 to June 18th, literally 1 week after it aired on the Tonys. No wonder why I missed out on this.
Now let me explain with this story here. I remember watching the Tony performance, and at this point I was a teenager and didn't really understand the attraction that I had to Alan Cumming, but it was there.
It's nice to go to work and make out with people that you like and you know.
Dude, I love him so much. He's only 27 years older than I am, so it's not weird to have a crush on him.
It's such a simple performance. It's so simple. They're just singing, they're just talking about their story, and it's a very depressing story in this song specifically.
For half a year, his soul and mine entwined. He touched me sweetly with a lover's touch.
The look that Alan has, he is a beautiful, gorgeous man already, and I just love the whole gothic look vibe that he has going on, very dark and edgy. I adored Cyndi Lauper's outfit. I remember even then I was in love with her outfit, but this was also around the time that I was also discovering the idea of pinup girls and falling in love with that. So it was a synergy moment, because at the moment Christina Aguilera had her Back to Basics album coming out, so that look was already in my mind, but I just fell in love. And there was no cast recording of this, which is such a shame by itself, because Alan Cumming has one of the greatest voices of all time. First of all, his Scottish accent is brilliant. I love Scottish and British accents, period. They are some of the greatest accents of the world.
Things weren't as sad and grim as they are now.
I swear, if this show had more coverage, a cast recording, and or a pro shot of the production, this would have been one of my hyperfixations at the time.
The army lives forever. I love the army. The bombs can't harm me. I love my knife and gun.
And I'm so sad that I never got to see it because I was too young to really appreciate it. Because at that point it was very dark and gritty and edgy, and it was something at that moment, since I was still only a young teenager, around 13, 14 years old, that I couldn't understand the dark, gritty undertones. And now I live for that stuff. And so I really wish, again, that there was at least a pro shot of that, but there's not. So this is one of the reasons why I want to make this video to talk about it. Because this musical, specifically the Three Penny Opera, I've always thought about that, how I wish I could have seen it, but I was too young to understand it when it was on Broadway, and it was too late, and it went off Broadway, and I grew up, and it's not here anymore.
I can also say that specifically, this performance changed me as a person, because for something so simple, it has always been so entrancing to me. Throughout the years, I revisited this multiple times, and my love for it just continues to grow. You'll see this pattern continue with the next couple of shows on my list, so let's jump to the next raunchy dark adult show.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
The Rocky Horror Show.
Once again, same reason, I was just too young for it. And when the Rocky Horror Show was last on Broadway, it was in 2000, 2001. This was a musical later on in life that really shaped my identity. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and I'm really happy that once I became a teenager, I was able to discover it and be able to watch it when I was 15. From that point forward, completely fell in love. Got to see a small community college performance of it, but outside of that, haven't been able to see any performances of it. And so I just want this to be back on Broadway. It's time for a revival. Like, it's been enough years to bring it back for a revival. If Spamalot just got a revival this past year, which should have stayed on Broadway longer, but that's another discussion, then Rocky Horror Show should be able to get back on Broadway. Make America goth again. And yes, this will be brought up multiple times further.
It's just a jump to the left.
Like I said, there's a pattern, and most of the shows that I've been so sad to have missed out on are all gothic/horror adjacent. So let's continue on to the next one in this category, Evil Dead the Musical.
Even though I was older at this point, because it was off Broadway, it was a lot more obscure at the time. And so this was completely under my radar. I also wasn't that into horror during that time in my life as I am today. I know it was a really big touring show. It still does tour around. It hasn't toured around where I am, but I know Canada has a lot of shows because I do see their social media. I see them active. I see them advertising for the Evil Dead the Musical, but it's so full of camp. I'm very grateful that I was able to find a bootleg version, slime tutorial of it years ago, so I was able to watch it, and it looks like so much fun that even with the slime tutorial bootlegs that we found, it's not the same as seeing it in person. Now, I wouldn't go in the splash zone, but I feel like that element makes it so fun. To Date Myself was the first song I heard from this show, and I also love that from this video, it shows the MySpace link. I will say, personal story, MySpace is how I found out about a lot of musicals when I was in high school, and MySpace really helped me get more in touch with a lot of the obscure musicals. Honestly, MySpace is a reason I know about Hedwig and the Angry Inch. That was my introduction because I was scrolling on MySpace, always wanted to listen to Broadway music, and someone had uploaded Wicked Little Town from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. That just started my lifelong obsession with that film and musical, and at least I got to see that with Neil Patrick Harris, but I would have loved to have seen the original with John Cameron Mitchell, but at least we have the film, and I'm very grateful for that. So the song specifically is What the F Is That?
What the fuck was that? Your sister has turned into a zombie. What the fuck was that? Your girlfriend was a demon too.
It just shows how amazingly campy and fun this show is. I would really love to see this show in some way one day. Can you tell that there's a pattern? Make America Goth again. Listen, Sweeney Todd left, so now we don't have any gothic adjacent musicals again, and I feel like we need to have some very gothic adjacent musicals on Broadway at all times. They've tried, especially within the last 20-30 years, but nothing has lasted. And I'm really sad that any of the vampire musicals, as a side note, have not made it.
Also, completely random idea that I just want to throw out there. Imagine a Camp Crystal Lake musical. Can this be a real thing? I also apologize in advance because I'll have more ideas for wishlist shows of mine at the end. We need more horror musicals on Broadway. Please keep on giving me ways to feel like it's Halloween all year round. Thank you.
In 2003, we decided to create a concept record called, well, it was American Idiot, and it was born, if you will. The album is about people lost, both personally and politically, and trying to find something that they can believe in.
Yeah, I don't know why American Idiot fell under the radar for me, but I think during that time, I was still going to shows with parents because this was in 2010, so I was still in high school at the moment, and I assume that even though I was interested in it, I don't know if my parents would have been interested in it, and it just completely fell under the radar, and I never got a chance to see it, and I would have loved to now. Like, I grew up with the album. I got the album when it came out. It's such a powerful album, and I do remember downloading the soundtrack to the Broadway show and listening to that all the time. So again, I don't know why I missed this. Personal antidote, I was able to see a very local production a couple of years ago. This dude that I was into at the time, who was low-key a drug addict, great story, I know. Some of his friends were a part of it, so I took a friend and me to go see their show because I was just curious to see the show. It was in a black box theater, very small, very intimate, very low-key production. The actors were phenomenal and they did an amazing job. Like, they had amazing singers, they had really fun choreography. Like, the show itself was put together so well. But the huge problem was the sound mixing was horrendous. And I don't know who was in the booth, but they messed everything up. And so because it was a black box theater, you were so intimate. And obviously you could see the actors and you knew the actors could see you. So you wanted to be as serious, as professional as you could and not laugh because it was a very serious show and it had a lot of serious undertones. But me and my friend were just sitting there the entire time, just waiting for it to be over and trying to enjoy it. But because the sound mixing was so awful, it just took us out of the moment. So I got to see a version of it, but it was a very interesting experience that I will never forget. And again, would have loved to have seen the Broadway version of it because it would have been so much better.
Also, as completely random as this is, one of the drag queens known from RuPaul's Drag Race, Mimi First, played St. Jimmy in this production. Yeah, my friend and I were reading all the bios of the characters and didn't know who they were because they went by their real name and not their drag name, and I connected the two afterwards. Like I said, it was a performance that I will never forget. We started this list out with a classic turn-of-the-century show, so let's end it with another turn-of-the-century show. Mary Poppins.
You know how when you're a person, you go through many phases in your life, and this was one of the phases of my life where at the time when Mary Poppins was on Broadway. I always loved the idea of Mary Poppins, but when it was on Broadway, I wasn't as big into Disney as I am today. At the moment that it was on Broadway, I completely missed out on it. But more specifically, another thing I completely missed out on until this past year, which I also have talked about a lot. I don't know why I slept on Christian Borle for so long. He is now such an inspiration to me, and obviously adore him, love him so much as a like personality, love him as an actor, and I slept on him for so long. I knew about him for so long, but never paid attention until this past year, and then boom, completely just like in awe of him. And he was a part of Mary Poppins back in 2011, playing Bert. And I love Mary Poppins so much. It is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. I adore Julie Andrews. She is queen. So like the fact that I completely missed this and went under the radar is something that I'm so saddened by.
Also, since Christian is now playing Albert in Bye Bye Birdie over at the Kennedy Center, that's the second role that he's portrayed that was made famous by the legendary Dick Van Dyke.
I'm gonna add one more honorable mention to this list, and that's Altar Boys, which is a very obscure off-Broadway musical. I would be surprised if anyone has heard of it. It was around in 2005. I think I knew about it again because of MySpace. The plot revolved around a boy band who was a Christian boy band, and they sang all about Jesus, but of course it's a comedy. And basically this walked so the Book of Mormon and Six respectively could run.
We are the altar boys. We love the wafers and wine. We are the altar boys, and I think you'll find we're gonna alter your mind.
I remember always listening to the soundtrack. Didn't really get that much deeper into it, but the soundtrack had some really fun songs, and I just feel like this would be such a fun experience to go see. Plus, I was doing some research, and I just discovered that it was written by Kevin Del Aguila, who was in Some Like It Hot. And he's done a lot of other things, but I just wanted to mention just specifically so I could add in this clip.
I'm afraid I must say.
9.
I'm afraid I must say. I'm afraid I must say.
9.
I'm afraid I must say. I'm afraid I must say.
Because he's amazing, and it's just, I was so happy finding this online. It's so great. Once again, that show closed way too soon, but it's just so funny that there's a connection there to something completely obscure that's almost 20 years old now.
It's crazy. He looks so young here. I know this was 20 years ago, but it's so weird seeing the difference. There's also the connection with how huge boy bands were around this time period. And just like every other 90s kid, I grew up with the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and all the hundreds of groups that were present. This footage alone just shows how accurate they were to portraying these real groups in this show.
About you, baby, girl, will you make me wanna wait?
That's my list of shows that I never got to see and wish I could have. Honestly, it's pretty short, and again, I'm grateful and understand the privilege that I've had to have seen so many. I briefly mentioned earlier in this video that I had a few wish list ideas for future shows.
And I would like to use this time right now to continue to keep pitching my hypothetical idea that The Black Parade should be a Broadway musical, and I am dead serious about that. It was made to be an opera in a way. It was made to be a rock opera. It's a phenomenal album. I literally talked about it all in this other video I did. Can some producers get on this? Can someone contact Broadway, please? Can we make this happen? Because I would need it to happen. It is one of my manifestation dreams. I'm putting it out there in the universe. Please, people, make this dream come true. But seriously, can you just imagine how brilliant it would be to be a musical that Black Parade, you already have a marching band on stage. There's the assemble of it. It already has amazing songs. Can you imagine if you like American Idiot-ified the Black Parade and was able to make arrangements for the Black Parade in a musical format but still keeping the rock vibe and the true sound of it? Oh my gosh, like Imagine. Plus, again, what I mentioned before, Liza Minnelli was a part of it, so therefore, it's already one step away from being Broadway royalty. Please, please share this around. Thank you very much. Imagine Helena. Imagine having Helena dance across the stage in her dress, and oh my gosh, it would be so good. This is not relevant to the topic on hand, but it is still relevant because it is a future Broadway show that I'd like to see, so technically it's still in the Broadway talking discussion. I'm getting ideas in my head. I'm getting ideas. Oh my gosh. You can mix their albums together even. You could put 3 Cheers from Sweet Revenge, The Black Parade together and have a mega My Chemical Romance musical. I mean, come on, how many people are fans? They would see it, it would sell out. While I'm on the subject for a short minute, I also ended up distracting myself while researching all the clips I wanted to add into this video, and I ended up going down this rabbit hole of another fantasy cast that I would love to see happen and be a part of. Earlier on, I talked about how brilliant of a film Singing in the Rain is. It is obviously one of my favorite films of all time, and yes, I have mentioned majority of the shows on this list are some of my favorites. But that's why they're here. Can we please have a limited run on Broadway, similar to how Merrily We Roll Along is, and have Christian Borle playing Don Lockwood, Tom Hiddleston playing Cosmo Brown, and Kathy Selden will be played by moi. Look, I know it's a crazy cast idea, but Christian Borle obviously is already an amazing tap dancer, and he's done so many of these shows similar that as soon as I started thinking about it, it was perfection. As for Tom, can he sing? Yes. Can he dance? Yes. Can he tap dance? I have no idea, but I understand my privilege here, and I'm very grateful that I was able to see him in a Broadway show prior, Betrayal, and he was phenomenal, and I have been dying to see him in another production back in New York again. This would be the chance. Of course, this is a personal fantasy list, but I'm just saying, it makes so much sense. I feel like Tom Hiddleston is known for a lot more dramatic roles, and I would love to see him do more comedic roles. Although, when I got to meet him, when I saw him in Betrayal, I was able to ask him if he would do more comedic roles, because when it comes down to his interviews, he can do funny very well. And he told me that he considered Betrayal a comedic role. And I'm still baffled by that to this day. And I wish I could have talked to him more to explain what he meant. Because Betrayal, if you're not familiar, and I'm sure a lot of people aren't familiar because it's a very obscure play in my opinion, I would have no idea what it was if he wasn't in that role, is a story in reverse about a marriage or relationship, I forget if they were married or just together, being broken up. And the one partner cheats on the other. Hence Betrayal as a name. So it's very serious, and it was a very serious show that we saw. So I still want him to follow up on that personally, because that didn't make sense of an answer. But yeah, genuinely I would love to see him do more comedic stuff, and genuinely I would love to see him be in a musical. Yes, this is a fantasy, and yes, of course I want to be a part of it, and I would love to be able to honor Queen Debbie Reynolds. I'm sure you're familiar that I actually hold highly of her. Like, she's a very important inspiration to my life as well when it comes to acting and just as a performer. I baked a cake for her after all. So I'm gonna try to dye the cake pink just like the one that she pops out of. That's my plan. That's my plan for today. And of course I know the chances of this happening are basically impossible, but to quote Walt Disney, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. So let me portray a hypothetical audition for you. Hello, my name's Erin, and I will be portraying the role of Kathy Selden. I will be singing a selection of Good Morning. Good morning, good morning. We gabbed the whole night through. Good morning to you. In the morning, it's great to stay up late. Good morning to you. When we left the movie show, the future wasn't bright, but came the dawn, the show goes on, and I don't want to say goodnight. So good morning, rainbows are shining through. Good morning to you.
So with the off chance that any Broadway producers are seeing this, let's make some calls and make it happen. I might not be a star yet, but with Christian and Tom, that's plenty of star power to start with. And again, how perfect would they be for these roles? Even the way they look are a little similar to Gene Kelly and Donna O'Connor, respectively, so physically, they fit the descriptions of the characters perfectly.
One of my favorite things to do is talk about theater, as I've just talked about for so long already. But I would love to hear if there are shows that you have wished you could have seen, but weren't able to for one reason or another, especially anyone that isn't around New York. I understand the lists are probably a lot longer. I remember going on TikTok when Sweeney Todd was around, and so many people were so upset that they weren't able to fly out to New York because they don't live nearby to see Josh Groban. And so I'm very grateful that I was able to, and I really appreciate that. Like, I know I'm grateful for that. So like, I know my privilege at times, and it, again, majority of this list is because I was too young to enjoy and understand these shows. It's really interesting living in the time that we live right now, especially if you're involved with the Broadway community, because Broadway is changing so much so often. How many shows unfortunately closed too soon last year? And again, it's a completely different discussion, but it is still something to mention. However, until then, we can all break a leg, and it'll be an interesting Tony season. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.